Hey, everybody, welcome. Wow. How exciting is this? I have to tell you, I am absolutely thrilled about being with you here today. And for those of you who are new to the Vineyard, maybe you're a first-time guest because somebody cared enough about you to invite you to join in online or to be here today in person. Just to let you know, we are currently, like right now, smack dab in the middle of a really exciting and insightful series of messages that we are calling Jesus on the Block. How cool is that? Jesus on the Block. And what we're discovering together is how to live our lives on mission by joining Jesus on the block in our everyday living through investing, inviting, serving, and sharing. And because so many of you are starting to learn how to really live your life on mission, I want you to know that last Sunday, right in this facility, in this grounds, right out here, we were able to welcome, get this, more than 30 new people. Isn't that great? We could just celebrate that. That is awesome. More than 30 new people. That is so exciting. Now, today I want to talk to you about how to have a change of heart. Would you take the outline out of your program entitled A Change of Heart? You know, with our new series, Jesus on the Block, each week, we're taking a really close look and actually reliving certain accounts that we read about in the Bible about real ordinary people like you and me that actually had an encounter with Jesus on the block. And today we're going to take a look at a guy by the name of Zacchaeus and how he experienced a complete change of heart when he met Jesus on the block, and what a difference it made in his life. Now, if anybody ever needed a change in heart, it would have to be Zacchaeus, because he had a lot of problems, even though he was filthy rich. And one of his problems was this. I mean, it had to do with his appearance. He was like abnormally short. And according to tradition, he was physically underdeveloped from the time he was a child. He was a dwarf. And because of this, you can only imagine the insecurity that must have dealt with and how insignificant he must have felt. And yet at the same time, his biggest problem was the fact that everybody in the whole community despised him. And the reason they despised him was because he was a tax collector. He was a traitor to his own people in that he was employed by the oppressive Roman government. And he was not just a tax collector, he was a chief tax collector. He had climbed his way up the corporate ladder into this regional position. And you know, tax collectors in those days working for the Roman government would not only charge what's due to the Roman government, but they would overcharge and pocket the difference. And this is how he got to be so filthy rich. So you can only imagine why all these people in the community so much despised him. And so one morning, as Zacchaeus crawled out from under his satin sheets and his silk pajamas and went to the mirror and looked into the mirror, he looked at his disgusting self with all of this deep, heartfelt regret. And then he remembered that word on the street is that somehow that Jesus is coming to town, that Jesus was coming to his hometown of the thriving city of Jericho. And so he decided, you know what? I'm just going to go and see this mysterious miracle-working man who at that particular time was perceived to be like this celebrity, this rock star. And he had heard about this block party that was taking place at the corner of Main Street and Meridian in downtown Jericho. So he thought, I'm not going to miss out on this. I'm going to go see Jesus. And I kind of imagine him disguising himself with jeans and sneakers and probably wearing a ball cap, maybe even backwards. I don't know. But as he slipped through the busy streets of Jericho and he gets to Main and Meridian where the block party is going to be happening and where this big procession is going to be coming by with Jesus and company, he's got a problem because he's so abnormally short, he's not able to see over all the people in the crowd. So you know what he did? He did the unthinkable. He flat out just broke out in a run as fast and as hard as he could to get ahead of the crowd, where he saw this sycamore tree and he climbs up this tree. Now we have to understand, in the first century, for a prominent businessman who's so wealthy like Zacchaeus to run was culturally unacceptable. It just didn't look, you just don't do that. Furthermore, actually climbing up a tree. So now he's perched in this tree. He's got a bird's eye view to catch a glimpse of Jesus when he was going to arrive and maybe see him passing by. So the crowd's lined all up and down Main Street, and as Jesus begins to come in the distance, the crowd's roaring louder and louder with great anticipation and expectation to get to be able to see Jesus, and hoping that maybe he would just hang out at their block party. And so when Jesus gets within view, he comes closer and closer until finally Jesus stops right at the bottom of the very tree Zacchaeus is in. And here's Zach up there wanting to be completely anonymous because all of these people despise him. His heart's pounding, his palms are sweating, and that's when Jesus looks up to Zacchaeus and actually calls him by his real name, Zacchaeus, and tells him to come down out of the tree, and Jesus invites himself to Zach's house to have dinner together. And our story begins here in Luke chapter 19 and verse 1. Luke chapter 19 and verse 1, and throughout the week, you can read this more, and we actually have the talk over in your program, and get together with other people, either in an existing life group or just start one. But this is what we read here. Luke chapter 19, verse 1, Jesus was going through the city of Jericho. A man was there named Zacchaeus, who was a very important tax collector, and he was wealthy. Now notice, he was a very important tax collector, so he was prominent, and he was wealthy, like stinking rich. And then we read on, he wanted to see who Jesus was, but he was too short to see above the crowd. He ran ahead to a place where Jesus would come, and he climbed a sycamore tree so he could see him. And what we're about to discover together is how Zacchaeus had a change of heart through being in the presence of Jesus and realizing for the first time in his life how much he really mattered. Have you ever thought about your life and how much your life matters? And I'm not talking about your net worth. I'm not talking about the kind of job you have or your income. I'm talking about your self-worth. As a human being, as a person, have you ever just thought about how much you matter? Now, the challenge we have is this. We've all been conditioned by our culture to base our self-worth and our value in life on our appearance, on our affluence, on our achievements, and also on the approval of other people in our lives. It's just the way it works in our culture. And every single one of us, bar none, have been conditioned to view our self-worth, our value, and how much we matter based upon those four things. But when it comes to your appearance, no matter how drop-dead gorgeous you may be, or extremely handsome, the reality is that we live in a dying body. And we are aging. And I know we don't like to hear it, but no matter what we do to somehow prolong this process, it's still about to happen. So eventually we're all going to sag and wrinkle up. Our hair is going to fall out. And for us guys, somehow our chest just seems to drop into our belly. You say, what happened? And when it comes to affluence, oh my gosh, I mean, you could be like on top of it, knocking it out of the park. I mean, you're reeling it in and everything's going great. And the reality is that one day you can be a hero and the next day a zero. We all know it comes and goes. There's an ebbs and flow, That's reality in life. Good times, bad times. And then when it comes to our achievements, we're on this like treadmill, like busy, working hard, trying to get somewhere through our achievements. And we all know that, some days you are knocking it out of the park. And then other days it seems like you work twice as hard and you get like little or nothing done. And then when it comes to the approval of others, oh my gosh, how unstable is that? To only feel good about ourselves when we meet everybody's approval, especially authority figures, whether it's a parent, a spouse, an employer. I mean, we're just like all over the map. And today with social media, we feel good about ourselves if we somehow have all these followers on Instagram or all of these likes on Facebook and all these friends and comments. But that's so shallow and it's so superficial. We need something solid to be able to understand our value, our worth, and how much we really matter. And so what's amazing in this account we're about to relive with Zacchaeus, there were really three outstanding truths that are revealed in this exchange with Jesus on the block that day that applies to every one of our lives. So would you write this down? Number one, first of all, is that no matter how insignificant I feel, Jesus notices me. And let me ask you, have you ever been to a party or in a crowd of people and you feel as if you're completely unnoticed? It's like you're invisible. It's like you're there, but then you're really not there because nobody notices you. And it's like as if you were not even there. And here's Zacchaeus, and he's hiding up in this tree. Now, he wanted to remain anonymous, but can you imagine how he must have felt when Jesus stopped at the very tree that he was at? In Luke chapter 19 and verse 5, we read here, when Jesus got to the tree, he looked up. I mean, just the fact that Jesus stopped at that tree, think about it. Along Main Street, Jericho, I'm sure there were all kinds of trees, a variety of trees. Not only sycamore trees, but palm trees, maybe pear trees, peach trees, I don't know. But out of all those trees, why would Jesus stop at this one particular tree? And then he looks up at Zacchaeus. Jesus noticed him. How did Jesus know he was going to be in that tree? Of all those different trees, Jesus noticed him being there. And you see, all the while, Jesus knew all about Zach being there. He knew all about his life. He knew about his regrets, his grief, his guilt and shame, the heaviness of the life that he was living. And did you know that no matter where you go or what you do, that God is watching you, and he's acutely aware of the reality in your life. Not only your public life, not only your personal life and your private life, but your secret life. He knows all about your broken dreams. He knows all about your desires, about your unmet, legitimate needs that you have in life. He knows you inside and out. He's aware of what's going on in your life. In Luke chapter 12, verse 6, Luke records the words of Jesus when he once said, God never overlooks a single one, and he pays even greater attention to you down to the last detail, even numbering the hairs on your head. Isn't that amazing that God knows all about how many hairs you have on your head? He even knows about how many hairs you used to have and that you no longer have. And he even knows the true color of your hair. Oh my gosh, nothing hidden in his sight. Now, I don't know how that makes you feel. For some of you, the very fact that God is watching you, every move you make, every step you take, for some of you, that's very comforting and it feels real warm and fuzzy on the inside. But yet, for some of us, maybe it makes us feel very uncomfortable and maybe even embarrassed. Like we want to run a hide, but we don't know how. How are you going to hide from God? Because maybe you somehow have this image and this idea of God as if he's watching you to catch you doing something wrong so he can pounce on you and punish you and make you pay for your wrongdoings in life. That is a distorted view of who God, our Heavenly Father, is and what he's really like. He's a kind, caring, compassionate, competent Father who's close and cares about you. I'll tell you what's really mind-boggling. I mean, this is just unfathomable. I mean, I can't even think about it too much because it's way too big. Let me just fry my brain, my pea brain. But to think that Jesus created the heavens and the earth, the whole entire universe, and it's all in perfect order in our solar system with the sun rotating on its axis, the earth rotating on its axis around the sun, and we have all the seasons and have for centuries, and to think, and here it is, in the midst of all the complexity of creation, that God is mindful of you. He's mindful of you. He notices you. And in this, we begin to awaken to the fact, oh my gosh, no matter how I feel about myself, no matter how insignificant I may feel, Jesus, he notices me. This is what Zacchaeus experienced. And number two, no matter what others say about me, Jesus affirms me. No matter what other people may say about me, I can always count on and know that Jesus affirms me. Now, you and I, we don't have any control over what other people think about us and say about us, and I realize how hurtful it is. One of the things that I really hate in life is to be misunderstood by people. The only thing I hate more so than being misunderstood is being misrepresented. To have people say things about me that are untrue and to really distort it. And it's just so hurtful in our lives. We can only imagine what it must have felt like for Zacchaeus. Here he is growing up with this kind of a disability of being abnormally short, physically underdeveloped, probably growing up with kids on the playground, making fun of him, saying really hurtful things, calling him names, growing up feeling rejected and ridiculed by everyone as a way of life. And now here he is as an adult. People despise him. It's bad. Think about it. He would have been disowned by his family, and he would have been excommunicated from going to the synagogue. Can you imagine? Not even allowed to go to church, never even experiencing community, marked for life. The rejection that he must have felt and experienced. And then we read this in Luke chapter 19 and verse 5. When Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus, and get this, he called him by name. Called him out right in front of not just hundreds, but thousands of people. Jesus called him by his real name. Most likely, nobody ever even knew his real name. They'd called him anything and everything in the book but his real name. But when Jesus called him by his real name, do you know what his real name means? Translated from the Hebrew into English, his real name actually meant righteous one, pure one, holy one, blameless one. Yet Zacchaeus was anything and everything but blameless, holy, pure, and righteous. Why in the world would Jesus call him by his real name? Because of this. I'm convinced that Jesus didn't see Zacchaeus for where he was at in that moment in time or where he had been, but prophetically could see him living out of his new identity with a changed heart, the person that he was to become. Wow. This is a game changer. That Jesus saw him through the potential that what would become after realizing how much he matters and living out of his new identity rather than all these years living out of this false identity based upon criticism and pain and hurt and rejection. You know, there was a time in my life, in my early 20s, before I had a change of heart, when I was at work, I was living my life for myself, doing my own thing, and I had this momentary impression. It was very kind of mystical in that I saw this impression, and it was very vivid of seeing myself, this image of myself as a righteous person, and I didn't even know what that meant at the time. And then it went away. And then fast forward several months later, I'm like, meet Jesus on the block in Hollywood, California, not because somehow intuitively I figured it out, because a person living their life on mission had a conversation with me and explained to me the good news, the gospel of the cross, and how I could be forgiven of my sins, how I could have a brand new life in relationship with Jesus, and how I could know to be his friend and be blameless in God's sight. And it changed my life forever. That's when I experienced this change of heart. In Luke chapter 19, verse 6, we see how Zacchaeus responded to this kind of unconditional love and affirmation. He hurried down, and he hurried and came down and received Jesus joyfully. Notice his response. Once his heart was warmed and he perceived it to be real, that he was noticed by Jesus, he was affirmed by Jesus, Jesus calling him by his real name. How did he respond to this kind of unconditional love and affirmation? He joyfully received Jesus. Now, I don't really know what happened in that moment. I mean, I could only speculate that maybe while he was dropping from the tree between a couple of limbs, or maybe right before he feet hit the ground, maybe because of Jesus, like noticing him and calling him by name, affirming him, maybe that's when somehow he made a decision for a change of heart. I don't know that, but it very well could be. But what I do know is this: I know that he received Jesus joyfully, and I know that it's a mystery of the miracle of a person being born again, going from being spiritually dead to becoming spiritually alive, going from living our lives as an enemy of God to a friend of his and a follower. I mean, it's just so powerful. And this is what it leads us to. Number three, this is the third truth, is that no matter what I've done, Jesus wants me. This is huge. No matter what you've done, Jesus wants you. Now, this is, of these three transformational truths, this has got to be the one that's the most challenging and the most difficult for us to fully embrace. That Jesus wants me. And the reason for that is this. We have a way of somehow dialing up some of our worst, darkest memories of our past. And in this, we're spiritually slimed, and we disqualify ourselves. And we say to ourselves, nobody could ever want me. And even Jesus, he could never want me, based upon your past mistakes, the places you've been, and the things you've done. But Jesus is so much bigger than that. This is what we read in Luke chapter 19, verse 5. He, that's Jesus, said, quick, this is to Zacchaeus, quick, come down, for I'm going to be a guest in your home today. Imagine that. Jesus invited himself to be a guest in Zacchaeus' home. Chances are Zacchaeus has never had a dinner guest in his home like ever, because he's so despised by everyone. And now here Jesus not only notices him and affirms him, but now he wants to hang out with him. He invites himself to be a dinner guest. Now, I don't know about you, but think about it for a moment. If Jesus were to physically show up today at the block party and invite himself to go home with you to have dinner, how would you respond? Probably initially you would be so surprised. And then you would think, oh my gosh, I have dirty dishes in the sink. I've got that broken door handle. The toilet it doesn't flush properly, and sometimes it stops. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? My home's a mess. How could I ever invite Jesus into my home? But what we don't know, Jesus does his best work in the messiness of our lives. And this is why so many people have this mentality that somehow, I'll clean my act up. Once I get my life together, once I change, then I'm going to start going to church. Then I'm going to be baptized, and then I'm going to start following Jesus. Oh, come on, who are you kidding? You can't change yourself. If you could have changed your own heart, you would have done it a long time ago. Only Jesus is in the heart-changing business. You come to him as you are. And in this, as you invite him into your home, he changes you from the inside out. Now, this is a beautiful picture of Jesus showing up at this block party and Zacchaeus experiencing being noticed by Jesus, affirmed by him, and wanted by him. But it wasn't a pretty picture for everyone that day. In fact, it ruffled some feathers. It caused the majority of all the people in the community to be angry. And this is what we read in Luke chapter 19 and verse 7. All the people saw this and began to complain, Jesus is staying with a sinner. Oh my gosh. They were so angry. They were so upset. Do you know why? Because they thought that Jesus only hung out with the oppressed, with the poor, the vulnerable, the disenfranchised, the down and outers of the world. They never even considered the fact that Jesus would hang out with an up and outer. We today have that same mentality. We think, Jesus shows up. He shows up to the poor and the hurting and the sick and the down, and he does. But he also shows up in palaces and government places, in the lives of people who are not the down and outers, but the up and outers and everything in between. But for them, this was hurtful because of this. They were the oppressed people, and Zacchaeus was the oppressor. They were the good guys, and he was the bad guy. And they were so gritting their teeth, angry and grumbling over the fact that Jesus would invite himself into the home of this sinner, they said. You know, one time, a lady made an appointment to meet with me. And on that day, she showed up with another lady friend for moral support. And I met with them in my office. And she said, Pastor Bricker, I'm here today to let you know there's a couple that recently started attending your church, and they're sinners. I know they are. And she'd described all of this stuff about this couple and how bad as sinners they really were. And then afterwards, she never even mentioned their names. She took a piece of paper that was folded up with their names written in it, and she slid it across my desk, and they got up and they walked out of the office. As soon as they walked out the door, I busted out laughing out loud. And I thought to myself, my gosh, I've spent much of my life, as well as our staff, creating a safe environment, a transformational environment for people who are broken and hurting and messed up and misbehaving to come and be changed by meeting Jesus on the block. And I was like, it was a great moment for me. It's like hot dog, we're getting somewhere. We got one. At least. And so anyhow, this was the tension that they were experiencing there that day. Now, the big question that hangs over our heads is this. How do we know if Zacchaeus really had a change of heart? We know that he was noticed by Jesus. We know that he was affirmed by Jesus. We know he was wanted by Jesus. But how do we really know he had a change of heart? Because of this. Notice with me, we read here in Luke chapter 19. Luke chapter 19, verse 8. Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord. Now, I don't know if this was while they were having dinner together or after the meal was over, but Zacchaeus stood up and he said to the Lord, I will give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I've cheated anyone, I will pay back 4 times more. That's a changed heart. I mean, here's a guy that had been ripping people off to line his pocket for most of his life, and he's willing to make restitution. And furthermore, he's like, I'm going to live a generous life now. He'd lived a stingy life for all these years, and now he's going to live a generous life. There are 2 kinds of people in the world. There are those who are takers and those who are givers. All of his life he had been a taker, and now he says, I'm going to start being a giver. He may even said, I'm going to start living my life on mission. I'm going to start investing, inviting, serving, and sharing. I'm going to join Jesus on the block and building his church. Then we read in Luke chapter 19, verse 9, Jesus said to him, salvation has come to this house today. The Son of Man came to find lost people and save them. This is what it's all about. This is why we're a missional church. We're joining Jesus on the block in our everyday living through investing, inviting, serving, and sharing. It's a starting point for us. We don't know where it's going to take us to, but in doing this, we're partnering with Jesus in building his church. Now, next Sunday, we're going to be celebrating changed lives through baptism. And this is going to be a great time. We're going to be back in the North Gym and the other big building up there. And so this is a great opportunity for those of you, if you've said a yes to Jesus and maybe you've privately made peace with God, but you've never gone public through baptism. Baptism is a symbol of our salvation. It's a sign of our salvation. It's going public with what's taken place personally in your heart. And for those of you here today that maybe you've never said yes to Jesus, or those of you joining online, I'm going to give you an opportunity to do so. Would you all please stand up? My guess is that we could all, to some degree, use a change of heart. I know I could use a change of heart. And only Jesus can change our heart from the inside out. For those of us here today that would just honestly admit in the presence of Jesus, I need a change of heart. I need a change of heart. The kindness of the Lord is here. The tenderness of the Lord is here to touch you and to change you. Jesus, would you come? Would you right now let us know that each of us are noticed by you, that we are affirmed by you, and that you really want us, Lord, just as we are, even in the messiness of our lives. So, Holy Spirit, would you now turn our hearts, change our hearts, Lord. Give us a new heart. Awaken us to our new identity in you, Lord, that we would live out of this true identity and not our false identity. For we ask this in your name, Jesus. Amen.